compassion and politics. Compassion can be a social artifact, and it can lose currency in a more selfish society. Consider the term compassion fatigue. It may be that the number of people who foster compassion in themselves and others is diminishing. It may be that we are overwhelmed by so many variations of emotional stimuli that we constrict reality to what we can absorb. Mostly, we just have difficulties with distressing things. There is a pendulum about social issues. Consider the political leadership that fostered welcoming attitudes to refugees in Australia in the early 1980s compared to the 1990s and beyond. Think about the courageous social policy initiatives concerning indigenous issues in the early 1990s compared with that in the early 2000s. There may be also a territory effect to social compassion, such that the degree of compassion is related to the distance from the person affected. Compare the sympathy for newborns with HIV in Africa with attitudes to intravenous drug users with blood-borne diseases, for example, in other countries. Political leadership can undermine the community's sense of compassion and the value we place on it. It is not accidental that the war on drugs wasn't really considered a human rights issue under the Duterte administration, despite calls from the United Nations. It's also interesting how we've seen the same closure against migrants in the United States and have also seen images of drowning children in Syria, such as the photo you have in front of you. There are many stories where our political leaders have been found wanting in recent years, especially in the area of welcoming others and being a more inclusive society. One good example is the Kiev X or 10. The suspected illegal entry vessel, X unknown, was an overcrowded Indonesian fishing boat with Iraqi and Afghani asylum seekers en route to Australia's Christmas Island. It sank on October 19, 2001, with the loss of 353 lives, of which are 146 children, 142 women, and 65 men. Some 20 hours later, an Indonesian fishing boat found the survivors. One of the 44 survivors commented then, "Whenever you look, you saw the dead children like birds floating on the water." About 7 weeks earlier, a Norwegian freighter had rescued 433 asylum seekers from a sinking Indonesian ferry in the Indian Ocean and headed to the nearest port, which was then the Australian waters. The Australian Prime Minister refused to allow them to land, and his political party went even further and turned their lack of compassion into an election banner that says, "We decide who can enter our country." Language is important here, as it so easily makes a human person into the other. the othering of those who are not like us. Consider how people who flee their country of origin and seek protection in another country can be called desperate people in necessitous circumstances. Those fleeing privation and persecution, refugees, asylum seekers, right through to unlawful entrants, illegal immigrants, and queue jumpers, people traffickers, and even terrorists. Language can include or exclude. We can be ungenerous, or it can be hospitable. We decide who can enter our country is a mean we. Our compassion antenna can be jumped by manipulative language like this. It interferes with the magnetic point of the moral compass. Compassion invites us to value everyone's story, to listen to the other, because we are all others. If the story is a struggle, then it is the lived experience for all. It is an essential story about a person of intrinsic worth with ultimate human dignity. Some narratives may have greater impact, positive or negative, but none are less deserving of compassion. All are vital to the whole. The Tibetan Buddhist Pema Chodron provides a clear perspective when she writes, "When you begin to touch your heart, or let your heart be touched, you begin to discover that it is bottomless, that it doesn't have any resolution, that this heart is huge, vast, and limitless. You begin to discover how much warmth and gentleness is there, as well as how much space." If you like this content, please subscribe to the YouTube channel Samo't sa Simula. Thank you very much.